Well, every Thomascember we try to look at the best the island of Sodor has to offer. With one exception. Okay, maybe two if you want to get technical. That doesn't count, that wasn't even released yet. But this year we're going to take the other track. No pun intended.
This year, as well as looking at Series 20 and Journey Beyond Sodor, we're also going to take a look at Series 8 to 12. Oh boy, I didn't imagine that coming out of my mouth. This is what many people claim to be the downfall of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, and they're right.
For quite a few years now I've had some fans asking me my thoughts on Series 8 to 12, and by God I didn't want to look at them again.
But admittedly I did watch a couple of episodes from Series 8 out of boredom and found that some of them weren't as bad as I remember them to be. Of course they're not great, especially when you compare them to the classic series, but they're not that bad either. It's really a mixture of some good episodes and a lot of bad episodes. So I thought I'd just have a quick look at them and see what they're like now compared to how I first saw them. And the results were somewhat surprising.
There's a lot of seasons to cover and a lot of suffering to be had. So let's begin Thomascember in Series 8 to 12, Series 20 and Journey Beyond Sodor. I hope you guys appreciate what I'm going to do for you.
Okay, so let's go back to where this all started. Hit Entertainment acquired the rights to Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends prior to the screening of the 6th series and filming of the 7th, when Britt Allcroft and David Mitton still had control over the show. Then once Hit finally had control of the show, they gave the show a massive overhaul. The stories were lengthened into 7 minutes, and the interactive statements were installed to allow the younger audiences to interact with Thomas and his friends. Britt Allcroft, David Mitton, Michael Donner and Junior Campbell retired from the show, and Steve Asquith stepped up as the director for the series. And the music from this series onwards was done by Robert Harshawn and Ed Welch, which isn't terrible, it's just not as good as Mike and Junior's music. And of course Michael Angelis continued to narrate for the show in the UK, and Michael Brandon continued to narrate for it in the US. And it also started when I first saw an advert for it on TV while I was watching Cartoon Network at the time. It was advertising a new Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends VHS tape and DVD, which indicated that there were going to be new episodes for Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends.
Holy crap, when I was a kid I was beyond excited about this. Thomas the Tank Engine had been airing on CITV in the early 2000s, and besides Series 5 and Series 6 and Series 7, we never got any other new episodes.
When I was a kid I was really excited, because since Series 7 we haven't had any new episodes on CITV. Because back then, after Series 7 aired, it was just reruns of Series 7 and Series 6. So I was beyond excited to see there was going to be more episodes of Thomas the Tank Engine on TV. When I first saw it, I was in denial and tried to convince myself that these were good episodes. But then after rewatching them again after a while, I started to see this for what it was. It was just Hit Entertainment trying to cash in on a popular franchise, which they had done before, but not usually with a franchise they hadn't owned in the past.
So yeah, the hype died down really quick, but I was still kind of interested to watch the episodes. I mean, after all, it was part of my childhood, and I really wanted to see some of the new adventures Thomas and his friends were going to have.
Some would say that this series had good intentions, but it was really just Hit trying to take Thomas and making their own. And they changed so much in the show that it's really hard to see it as the classic series that we grew up with. Of course, the kids from today's generation at that time would have loved it, but for the classic series fans, it was a huge downgrade. A lot of things changed for this series, including the direction, the music, the writers, the camera work, the use of CGI elements, and even the models. And some of the characters had changed too. While Thomas was still the main character that he was in the original series, and James was still the arrogant, dishonest jerk that he was in the classic series, and Gordon was still the stuck-up fool, other characters were changed a lot. Like Edward, for example. Edward is a prime example of the worst elements of this series. His character has taken a turn for the worse since then. In the classic series, he was the wisest engine on the railway team and performed any task with little difficulty. But from Series 8 onwards, he was just a weakling who was very weak and feeble and always had to prove himself. And it was very rare in this series that we actually saw him with an expression that wasn't pathetic. So everybody just went off the rails when this happened. Again, no pun intended. Another huge character change in this series was Emily, who was recently introduced to the show in Series 7. When she was first introduced in Series 7, Emily was a kind engine who would have no ill word said about anyone. Examples were proven in Salty Stormy Tale, but here they just reintroduced her as a complete bitch. I mean, almost every scene she's in, she's always being rude to another engine, and that's just so out of character for her. Much like how out of character Diesel 10 was in calling all engines.
Now, having Emily be this kind of character in Series 8 onwards doesn't work, because that's not the type of character she was when she was introduced in Series 7. So just having her be like this out of the blue is just really confusing. It makes no sense.
Maybe if they were to introduce a new character, then this would have been fitting. But because we know Emily from Series 7, this is so unfitting. On top of that, there's many episodes that seem to contradict earlier episodes. Like having Thomas learn not to rush multiple times, and just some lessons being learnt by other engines that Thomas had already learnt. I mean, it's like the writers were out of ideas or something. Almost like how The Simpsons is at the moment. Oh yeah, I went there. Also, no new characters were introduced in this series since the team wanted to focus on the 8 main engines. Yeah, Emily's a main character in the series now. Also, around this time and the recording of the 7th series, Michelangelos was getting on in those days, and it really shows. He could no longer give off that massive energy he was able to give in the classic series, from series 3 to 6. And every time you hear James and Percy talking in this series, it just sounds like they're shouting every syllable that comes out of their mouths.
You're lucky, James Huff. I have to do the Black Locker Run. Big Blue show off. Puff Percy.
Years later, and I still don't understand why Michelangelos had to make Percy and James sound like they were always shouting every syllable that came out of their goddamn mouths.
But aside from all that, there are some decent episodes, or good episodes, but not exactly top-notch. Like, admittedly, I thought Halloween was a kind of funny episode, because I think it's funny to see Ari and Bert play tricks on Thomas and Emily, even though that's not the characters they were in Series 5. But it's quite a funny episode, and it's really hilarious to see the Fat Controller in his pyjamas. Fish was quite entertaining, even though it copies the title from a Series 4 episode. So I think it's quite nice to see Thomas working with Fish, even though he hates Fish. Spick and Span was admittedly another funny episode. Like, the ending bit with Gordon, James and Emily is kinda laugh out loud. And Gordon Takes Charge is quite entertaining because it's so nice to see Gordon being the pompous character that he is. And it's really great to see him get his comeuppance at the end. And even though I don't like Emily's new character from Series 8 onwards, I do admittedly like Emily's new route, because that's one of the few times where she's not a complete bitch to anyone else. And Thomas Saves the Day was quite an enjoyable episode, especially with that great chase scene and the music that they did for it. And I do have a soft spot for Don't Tell Thomas, because I quite like the idea that they have a surprise for the main character, but them not telling him anything makes him feel left out. I guess I'm just used to that plot because I've seen it loads of times in other specials.
So yeah, this was the definite downfall for Thomas the Tank Engine and friends, but it's not gone awful, especially when you compare it to the Sharon Miller era.
So while Series 8 is a bad series, it does have some decent episodes. So if you could find some good episodes in Series 8, then I would recommend watching them and just skipping all the bad episodes. But if it's not to your taste, then I'd skip it myself. And this was only the beginning of the bad seasons of Thomas the Tank Engine, and there was more suffering to come.
And may God have mercy on us all.